Hey, hey!
What's up? Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Relationship Revolution.
The Relationship Revolution!
This is part one or section one of the revolution, which is roots. And this is part one of the roots section right here. And our mission with the roots is our self-evaluation, our self-inventory, and ways to keep pouring back into you.
And you'll figure out why we're doing that in just a second, but we just want to let you know where we're going.
So with that being said, we have a lot to cover. We're excited to get into this. We're excited that you have joined us along for this mission to revolutionize your relationship. Mm-hmm. Remember, there's going to be a lot of exercises that you're going to have to do that are going to be very interactive. This is part of the homework. Every single section has homework to it. It is very important to take the time out and really get through all of that homework before you go into the next video or the next section. It really helps to take that time out and make sure that you're building on top of the last section. So with that being said, Meg is going to get us underway with roots.
All right, so one of the big issues that we see that's super common is in relationships, whether or not you're in a relationship with someone or you're wanting to attract a partner, is you want that person to be something in particular. You want them to be a certain characteristic or a certain vibe, a certain person. But the problem is usually you aren't that person yet. Oh, so essentially what that is we forget to develop ourselves first. We always want to put the pressure or all of our energy and our focus into the other person. And that's something we can't control, which we'll get into that in just a second. But right now, this is like the ultimate personal and relationship development boot camp.
Boot camp, huh?
Both into fitness, both into taking care of ourselves. So think of it as that. It might be hard at times, but just stay with us. We're trying to shorten that learning curve for you. So what the first big takeaway that I want you to think about, you are going to attract what you are. You're not going to attract what you aren't. You're going to attract what you are. So again, you're going to follow along with some of this in your homework. That's the first big takeaway. So now is the time to actually clarify and get clear on what you want and what you need, because that is something that a lot of people don't do. And then they get stuck into relationships where they've settled, they're not happy, or they keep this cyclical insanity cycle of recycle relationships. You're like, I'm about to pull your hair out of. So that's what we're going to get clear on first. Because what happens is if you're not clear, you're going to go out and you're going to catch something. That sounds terrible. You're going to catch someone, not something. You're going to catch someone, and then you're going to self-sabotage, or maybe they're going to self-sabotage. And what's going to happen is then you're not going to be able to sustain the relationship. So you're either going to let the person go, you're going to release them, or they're going to release you. And then you keep going and you keep going, and it just becomes a cyclical thing. The reason why this happens is we put the power and our focus into the other person versus yourself. You know how messed up that is? That is putting so much power and energy into something that you cannot control. This person, why do I keep saying thing? This person is outside of your control. It is something that's going to continue to change, and that's not where your energy should be. It should be focused on you. Instead, we put it on our partner so much. So we need to put our energy on ourselves, because that is something that hopefully you're going to be consistent. You're not going to change a lot. It is something within your control that you have power on. So we need to switch gears and focus it on you. So again, it's time to break that insanity cycle. When your energy is solely on the other person, guess what? Nagging seems to happen a lot more. And the guys, I hate to say this, but a lot of times women are more prone to nag than men. Doesn't mean that men don't do it too. But what happens is then you set up shop in this whole nagging department because you're unsatisfied, because you keep putting the power into your partner versus putting power back into you. And what happens is it disconnects your communication. And when the discommunication is disconnected, that's when the other partner starts to shut down. They're no longer listening. I mean, you know that from a guy's perspective.
Yeah, from a guy's perspective, when we hear that nagging and that just that tick, 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 just tapping on the shoulder, we end up eventually going through a phase, and then we get to a phase called a stone wall, where we just don't even hear anything. It just, we're impervious to your nagging. We just don't even hear it. It just bounces right off.
Yeah, so the more as a woman
you don't want
that
to
you
get to
keep
that.
nagging, or again, I'm just using this as an example, but when you keep nagging and you think that you got to do it more often or louder, they've already muted you. You are on mute. That's no longer happening. So again, the energy needs to happen and be focused on you first before you put it out on the other person. So we need to make sure that we're fine first, and we're doing everything in our power to then try to communicate what we want from a reasonable aspect. But we'll get into the communication issues later. So another big take-home point, why clarity is so important and why the focus needs to be on you first before you attract the person that you want or before you work on your relationship, is because if you don't get clear, you settle. Let's just repeat that. If you don't get clear, you settle. Now I'm going to use an example of why this is so important from my own personal story, my own personal life. We think that stories really help, and the more that you see us as human, the more you're going to connect and resonate and realize that we're not perfect either. And a lot of things that we learn happen from experience. So clarity starts with you, and this is a big thing. So, oh man, like a decade plus ago, I would say,
Yeah, it was a long time.
I was in a relationship that was probably my most unhealthy relationship. And at that time, I was really lost and confused. I had, just previously called off a wedding. I was trying to figure out who I was. And as a result, I jumped into a relationship immediately after without knowing what I wanted, what I needed, who Meg was. And as a result, I was settling for someone that didn't have a lot of the things that I wanted and needed, and it just kept creating this chaos. So one day I came home. I had already worked 12-hour shift at my job previously, and I was exhausted. And I came home to this person in my house who hadn't done anything all day and was expecting me to cook, not really helping around the house, not really doing anything, but already just needed everything from me. And I felt like I was being taken from. I felt like this is not what I had imagined my life looking like. But what it did was it forced me to actually stop and be like, is this really what I want? Now, granted, we were not married, so that's a little bit different when you're in a marriage versus when you're just dating. Like, you have more of an opportunity to switch things up if it's really not working. But it was a big aha moment. Like, I needed to get clear on what I personally needed and wanted before I could get clear on what my partner needed to be like. Because at that time frame, I didn't know, so I was just allowing anything to happen. As a result, I was settling. So unless you can communicate that while you're in the relationship and try to get them to kind of get on the same page, basically, I'm not going to hear any of these empty promises that they're giving me until they put action behind it. Action is something I can see. A lot of those empty promises, sorry, it's kind of like the muting. I can't hear it until I see it.
Amen. Wow. Well, now it's time to go into the deceptive disguises. We have to drop the deceptive disguises. Woo! There's a lot of deceptive disguises out there. Have you ever been across one of them? Have you ever had what I call the fake out purchase? Oh my goodness. Let me tell you this. Or better yet, I go to something in our past, and you'll know about what I'm talking about in here just a second. But I remember one time we had somebody invite us to a large event. We went to this event because they told us how amazing the food was going to be.
I know what you're talking about.
And it was like, oh, we got all these caterers. We got all this stuff that's going to be there. We're going to have different stations. This is going to be amazing. So we get there all hungry. We made sure, as a matter of fact, I think I didn't even eat that day because I was excited. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, we're going to throw down. So we get there and womp, womp, womp.
We were starving.
Oh my goodness. It was not what was advertised.
Like, Derek likes like a big piece of meat if he's gonna have one.
Yeah.
And it was like this little
medallions,
thing.
medallions,
Yeah.
little small
we don't
medallions.
Have to give details of all of it, but it was not what we expected.
It was not what we expected, but
we were deceived.
That's the same thing when it happens with partners. Have you ever been in a relationship, or you ever gotten into a relationship where you were faked out? You thought that the person that you were going to be kidding with with somebody totally different. And then maybe a couple months, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple years down the road, you realize that this is not what you facade that you put up and made me believe that this is what we were getting into. We didn't believe that. So, and then there's two different styles of this. There's intentional and there's unintentional. Now, I want to just harp on for just a moment about the intentional. All right. I'm going to call out, and if y'all get mad at me, that's okay. But I'm going to call out some guys here. All right. A lot of guys intentionally put on that fake facade because in their mind, they're thinking about something that they really like to desire, something they really want to have. And oftentimes guys will put on this facade. They will put on this fake out thing until they get that thing that they want. So be careful with these deceptive disguises. I've seen it time and time and time again. And
I've lived through it a lot. Just put it out there.
And I just want to be very clear on that. That is the intentional deceptive disguises. But there's not only the intentional, there's the unintentional deceptive disguises. So let me ask you a question here. Do you remember a time where you didn't show up as yourself because you decided to just shrink those areas of yourself in front of somebody else because they won't like it? It's too much for them, or they won't be able to handle that. Let me do less of this and more of this because now I'll be somebody that they like. Oftentimes people do this with friends or different, people that they hang out with. And they say that I need to be like this so they continue to hang out with me. And we do it with partners all the time. And oftentimes it's unintentional. We don't do it with our conscious minds. It's subconsciously, we are just trying to conform to something that we're not. But you belong to you, as Brene Brown would say. You belong to you. So how can you be the full version of you? Love that and show up as that. And if the person doesn't like it, we'll just keep it moving. And this is something that can also be worked on even if you're already in a relationship. Because we continue to grow, we continue to evolve. But do not shrink who you are. Make sure that your partner knows exactly who you are and you know exactly who your partner is. Because if you don't, years down the road, weeks, months, whatever it is, you're going to have that friction and you're going to wake up and say, I don't know this person and they don't know me. So that is a rude awakening that I wanted everybody to get up.
It's kind of like the quote that I was telling you today. Essentially, like if you're acting a certain part, eventually you're going to forget your lines.
Oh, wow. That is so good.
If you are putting on a facade and you're acting a certain person, eventually you're going to be able to keep up with it.
And the thing about it is when you reject yourself in a relationship, even if it's unintentional, you're not even consciously doing it, eventually your whole relationship is built on a lie, something that is not true. And if your relationship is built on something that is not true, it's bound to fall. It is bound to crumble. So a lot of times rejection, betrayal, lying, all those different things it is built on. It is time to stop and drop those disguises. I didn't think about that. Stop and drop, not roll.
You can't roll over it. You can roll over the disguises. Stop, drop, and roll over the disguises.
But the thing is, it begins with you taking care and honoring yourself. That self-love and self-care is where it all begins at. And you got to love yourself. You got to love who you are. And you got to fall in love with you all the time. You might as well, because you're going to spend a lot of time with yourself. Okay, so you might as well enjoy it. All right. So the typical flaw is most of the time people focus on the external. When they think of self-care, immediately they go to external, which, don't get me wrong, external is important. External does bring value to your confidence and your self-image. It is amazing what it can do to you. A lot of times when we think about the physical body, or we're going to go working out, or going to the salon and getting my hair done, or getting our nails done.
But not even just that. If you want to take it outside of even our body, like with men, for example, what they're doing in their careers, the success facade, which you should still be doing this. You should have a job and all that kind of stuff.
100%.
Or the car that you drive, but you're not showing up as who you truly are inside and really trying to extract that.
So it is definitely good to continue to work on those external, but let's shift that around and let's start looking at the internal. How much time did you spend developing your character, your values, your
Knowing what those
faith,
are.
knowing what those things are? When you're able to know what you stand for, the saying goes, you won't fall for anything.
Yep.
If you know what you stand for, you won't fall for anything.
That was my example, as I talked about earlier. I didn't know what I stood for. And
Absolutely.
As a result, I settled.
You really settled. But anyway, that is what it's about. And so the self-alignment is a must. Self-alignment is a must. And what are we aligning? We're aligning with our character. We're aligning with our values, and we're walking it out in life. So what you are on the inside will show up on the outside.
Naturally.
Especially if you are bigger in the inside than you are on the outside. And that's a John Maxwell quote. He's amazing. But if you're bigger on the inside, it'll automatically show up on the outside. So one of the exercises I just want to talk about that I love people to do together is our Synergy Spark. All right. So as a Synergy Spark, I'm going to ask you 2 questions that you guys can work with and ask each other. But first, ask yourself, then each other. What can you stop doing? What can you stop doing that is keeping you or holding you back from what you want to be?
And that's how we do things a little bit differently. Sometimes you want to keep adding all these things onto your plate, but sometimes there's gold in what you can stop doing that's going to really elevate your life, your relationship, your development of self. It's the self-sabotage. It's the things that are preventing you from having the things or being the person that you truly want to be.
100%. The first thing I love to do when I am going after a mission, after a goal, or something I want to attain, whether it's inside or externally, is call out the distractions. How can I not get distracted and off track with that distraction? How can I stay on track? And so you call out the distractions first. And then my second question is, what can you do to show up fully aligned? You can see, you get away from the things that keep you away from it first. Then you can focus on what you can do. But make sure that we always call out those distractions. And trust me, we live in a world of distractions. Yes. So there's a lot of them that you can call out. But, call out the top 3 distractions that you really need to avoid.
And it may not all happen at once. Like, you just calling out these distractions does not mean that it's going to be a miracle and all this stuff is going to go away. One of the big things that happens is when you are aware, you're going to hear us say this over and over again, you're going to be aware when you do that, the thing that you don't want to have happen. And maybe you still go through and do it, but you catch yourself in the act and then you stop. So maybe you do that less. And then the time after that, you do it even more or less. You do it lesser. Whatever. Then after that, you keep again until it's no longer something that you get distracted with.
Absolutely. We love to say that all the time. It's about progress over perfection. We're getting further. We're taking one step closer to where we want to get. But now it's time to get our self-care game on point. So how to get your self-care game on point? We have to start off with that habit creation. How do we start implementing and creating those habits that are going to serve you in what you want? And that's what it's about. Well, that self-care starts with knowing thyself, knowing who you are, and knowing what you want. Get away from distractions. And now that you've asked yourself, what can you do? Now get your calendar out. When are you going to do those things that you can do? And how are you going to do those things that you can do? And start implementing those actions every day. One action that has been a game changer for me is waking up a little bit earlier and meditating over that day. Meditating over the day that I'm about to go into. And I ask myself one question: when do I need to be at my best today? I ask that question every single day, and that's something that we want to do. So make sure that we're doing that, and that will help you get on track. It's not going to get perfect all at once, but every day will get better. So I want to go into the importance of being whole, all right? Has anybody ever heard, or I take this back, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this. Anybody seen the movie Jerry Maguire? You complete me. Is that what he said? Something like you complete me. That was a beautiful movie film. It's a beautiful just tearjerker right there, that moment. That's just like, wow. But let me just tell you something. That ain't true. All right, people. You are whole. You are complete with yourself. There is no 50-50 relationship. There's a 100 and there's a 100.
And usually that's not what happens, but that's what the goal is. That is what we're trying to get you to tap into.
Absolutely. So I want everybody to understand that and get into that more. You have to take care of yourself so you can show up and give that 100 every single day. So if you're doing that, I want you to think about on an airplane and think about when they talk about when everybody is not paying attention and they're doing that whole the whole safety precautions in the beginning of the flight. They talk about the air and the oxygen mask. What do they always say about the oxygen mask? Make sure that you put your oxygen mask on first before helping anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you have to take care of yourself. You can't give what you do not have.
Amen.
And you want to talk about the fuel tanks.
Yeah, okay. So this is something I've taught for years, and I think this is the best way to really tap into what you need and what you need more of and what you need less of. And it's what I call fuel tanks. So we're going to take inventory, but I got to explain exactly what I mean by that first. So imagine yourself driving down the road and like you look and your your car is on E, your gas light is on E, and you're like, oh, I can make it. And sometimes
you
I
say
have
that
this. You just have a whole half tank, but I am like one of those people that pushes that a little bit more, which is probably why I teach this. And if you don't get to a gas station in time, you're going to find yourself on the side of the road because you have gone below empty. And so you're going to be frustrated. You're like, now I got to figure out how to get to the gas station, get gas and put it in there. So essentially what that means is for the car, the gas is what, or the fuel is what runs the car. But for us as human beings, we're a lot more complicated. So we have more things that help fuel us to make us thrive. Now, everybody's might be a little bit different, but I'm going to give you my framework for this. So I divide it up into different F words. So fit and focus. So, and you're going to see this on your homework. How do you fit into the world? What is your purpose? How are you a piece of the puzzle of this big entire world? Mm-hmm. So that's like maybe your career, like the fit part, or what you do in life, how you give back. And then that also deals with your focus too. The next fuel tank is family and friendship. So that is going to include your significant other. It's going to include your best friends, your family, if you've got kids, all of that. That's another fuel tank. Another one is faith. So what is bigger than yourself that you believe in? Same thing with food and fitness. You can either rank those together or separate. But again, what are you physically consuming in your body to help you thrive? And then with the fitness, how are you moving? It doesn't necessarily have to be one type of fitness, just as long as you really utilize your body and move. Finance is another one. So how do you utilize your money? Are you good with that? Are you terrible with it? Again, this is yours. You can add more to it. That's what we're starting with. But basically, all of those things help you run your body. When they get low, again, you're going to end up like the car on the side of the road. So we want to try to minimize that. And so how you minimize that is by fuel tank optimization. So we're going to go into this a little bit more. I want you to, with all those things that I mentioned, just rank yourself right now. How well are you in that particular area? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you working out? Like, are you a 10? 10 is going to be the highest. And if you haven't put on running shoes or gone into a gym or moved your body in a long time, my guess is you're going to be a 1 or a 0. So again, that's going to be when your fuel tank is like scraping on the bottom. Now I want you to go through and do that on all of those areas. After you do that on those areas, I want you in your workbook to rank your highest fuel tank. Then I want you to answer why. Most likely, one of your highest is a priority to you. Your focus is put onto that more than what the next question is going to be is what's your lowest? And again, why? Again, your higher fuel tanks are going to be because of you prioritizing, you putting some energy and some focus on those. So the goal is to have high, overflowing fuel tanks. Now, is that possible all the time? No, it's called balance. But again, you want to keep coming back and checking in with those. Another thing to really pay attention, because all of these things affect relationships, and that's why we're discussing them, is your energy and also your esteem, so your self-esteem. So when your energy is low, which we know this from people we've been with, how do you think that's it's gonna affect your relationship? If you're like, if you're like, we're so big into energy, so if you're like, hey babe, how are you? And that's like your happiness, like we got a problem here. Like Houston, we got a problem. So we need to elevate that energy. Taking care of all these things is gonna help raise that energy. The same thing with esteem. If your self-esteem is super low and you're just like struggling and like you keep giving to every single person but yourself, and your fuel tanks are low, it's going to affect your esteem. And as a result, it's going to affect your relationship. Maybe you don't want your partner to see you because you feel like you've let yourself go, or you don't feel attractive, or you don't feel
smart enough, good enough.
Yeah, good enough. All these things. It's not just a physical. These things matter. These things are going to really affect your relationship. It's going to impact your relationships. It's going to affect how you connect. It's going to affect how you communicate. Because sometimes when you're not happy with yourself, you're going to project that onto your partner. Have you ever had like a really where you're just frustrated and you're like, ah! And as a result, you take it on your partner? They don't deserve that. Look at this face. They don't deserve that. So this is what I mean by fuel tank optimization. I want you to try to do this at a week at a time. Take a look at this. And the goal is, again, get those numbers higher. We want your lowest ones to be overflowing. As you start to become aware of where you're not prioritizing, again, the awareness is key. You're going to start prioritizing that more and putting it into your schedule. We're not about perfection, it's progress. So doing it each week is really going to optimize your fuel tank.
100%. I think that you said it so amazing there. And, you know, we're trying to get you to do a self-analysis, which leads to self-awareness, which leads to targeted action. That's it.
You're going to know what your focus and your aim is. So I worked with clients, to give you an example, for a long time. This is something I want you to do. This can seem really overwhelming. Just like this entire course, we're trying to minimize the overwhelm. We're breaking it up into chunks so you can just concentrate on things little by little, and it's going to build on that foundation. The same thing with this. So what your lower areas are, like pick one and just pick one. That's all I want you to do. We're going to work on one thing. So for example, with clients that I've worked with in the past, let's say their eating was like atrocious, like, ugh, it was just terrible. And we also knew like that they were eating out through the drive-through every single meal. Well, one big thing that they can focus on is just quitting going through the drive-through and replacing that with a home-cooked meal. That's going to be a huge step. That's one thing that they can do. And once they get good at it and they get consistent with that, then, and only then, they can add something else onto it. Because once you build up that consistency with something and build up into what's going to become a habit, then you can move on. The problem is, a lot of times people want to try to do everything at once, and what happens? They stop because it's just too much.
Absolutely. I think you said that very well. Well, that is pretty much it and all that we're going to have for part 1 of Module 1, Roots. Just remember, you want to make sure that you take the time to go and get your workbook exercises done. Get through those exercises. And one thing that I actually learned, or we actually learned together from Jim Kwik, which is an amazing high-end motivational speaker, but not only speaker, but he also is a teacher and is known for learning things quicker. How do you learn things quicker?
Jim Kwik.
And Jim Kwik is his name, but
Jim Kwik quicker.
Yeah, Jim Kwik. But there are 3 questions that he always asks, and I want you to ask these questions as well as you're going through your exercises. First is, how can I use this? That's the first question. The second question is, why must I use this? Hopefully it has something to do with making a better relationship or showing up better for your relationships. And third question is, when will I use this? That coincides with your calendar. So that's what we have for you. We will see you on the next part, Roots Part 2.
Good job.